So hi, I'm Amanda. I am the curator of Chandron Gallery, which we've been working with Callie for quite a long time now. And then today we're hosting this with If You Were Here Now, which is a website and event and workshop space for artists and creatives to come and kind of explore the more nurturing side of making work and creativity and our, especially during this time, like really focusing on our mental health and our creative practice. So we have, I'm just letting people in here. Actually, I'm gonna let Swoon take it from here, Callie.
All right, thank you so much, Amanda. So if you were here started when the pandemic hit, when we all needed to find ways to connect.
Sorry, I'll keep muting people here. Oh.
And in the space where we needed to find some time to connect. And so the reason that we are here tonight is because I am working on a project with PBS that's called The American Portrait. And it's a project that's about storytelling, and it's about sharing our deepest truths. And Heather and Julian, do you want to introduce yourselves a little bit before I start?
Sure. So, hi everyone. It's so good to see the dozens of faces popping up on the screen, and so many people that are new to us and so many people that we know. And so I'm Heather Box, and I am the co-founder of the Million Person Project. And
I'm Julian Mocine-McQueen, also co-founder of the Million Person Project.
And we exist to support change makers in telling their truest personal story publicly, because we really believe that when we are sharing our stories and we are operating from an authentic and open place, that is the pathway for true connections with one another and for healing and for all the good stuff. So we're big story people, and we love working with Callie, and we're excited to get going today.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys. And so Heather and Julian are going to be leading the workshop tonight, but I'm just going to start by telling a little bit about how this came to be. So about 5 years ago, I was getting ready to give a talk at this lovely little conference. And I usually like public speaking. It makes me a little nervous, but I basically like it. But on this day, I was gonna throw up. I was beside myself. The feeling that I was gonna pee my pants was with me constantly, no matter how many times I ran to the bathroom. And in one of those trips, this guy grabbed me and he said, "Hey, I see what's going on with you. You're totally wound up." He's like, "I was an Iraq veteran, and before we would go into dangerous situations, I would get wound up like you are now, and I'm going to help you walk this out." So he just had me walking it out in the hallway before I got up on stage. And the reason that I was so upset was because I knew that I wasn't about to go up on stage and talk about my cool new thing, which most of the people at the conference were. I was about to get up there and break a decades-long family taboo by describing what it was like to grow up with a mother who was sometimes so psychotic that she once force-fed her 6-year-old child alcohol as a kind of preemptive revenge against aliens who were coming out of the sky at any moment to eat her alive. So I was essentially torturing myself and asking myself, why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself through this? And why are you about to put all those people in this room through this too? But the reason that I persisted was because although I did feel like I was about to go out there and dump a screaming rat into the punch bowl of this lovely conference, I also knew that I wasn't just walking out there to try to shock people for no reason. Because I had spent weeks working with Heather and Julian on how the things that happen in our lives become the fuel for what we care about the most and drive our ability to make change in our lives and also in the world. And the reason that I had reached out to them was because I had recently gone through kind of a conversion experience where over that past year, I'd gone from a lifetime of blaming and hating my unstable mother, just like, our Fox News culture, American culture had taught me to do. And I got to a place where I started forgiving her because I had been given the key to understanding that her addiction was actually the result of lifelong trauma that had never been addressed, and that no amount of punishment was ever going to help her more than forgiveness and healing could. And that experience and that reconnection brought on by that understanding was so powerful that I knew that I wanted to help the world understand it too. And not just understand it as an abstract concept, but understand it as a real truth that had been lived by this real person. And so I went through this whole process with Heather and Julian, and I started to share my story. And when I did, two things started to happen. And the first was that the things that I cared about most in the world, they were now able to take center stage within my work as an artist because I wasn't hiding from them anymore. And so that meant that I could make work that I was more proud of than maybe anything that I'd made up until that point. And then the second thing that happened is that I became able to show up a lot more whole in my own life. Because before this, I'd be like at some fancy art event and I'd be looking around the room and just thinking like, why am I here? These people don't know me. They don't know the dirt roads that I grew up on, and they don't understand the alcoholism and addiction, and they don't know what it's like to be constantly striving for normalcy, but constantly devolving back into chaos anyway. I'm not like them. And in that way, I felt like I was hiding. But when I started to tell the untellable parts too, I started to send a message to myself, which was that in all times and all places, I'm an okay human being, and that I accept the life that I've lived, and I accept the life that you've lived too, and that now we don't have to hide from each other. And that's been such a gift. And it's made me want to continue to build a culture where we can share our deepest truths and where we can work together and just like figure out how to turn our life experiences into fuel for the change that we want to see in the world. So that's why I invited you guys here today. And that's why Heather and Julian are about to take you through a process.
Wow, Callie, thank you so much. You see people clapping. Yes, feel free. Put some love and gratitude into our chat. Feel free. So we're going to start with a conversation with you, Callie, before we get there, and Heather will kick us off with that. Before we do that, I just want to say we had some questions. We are recording this Zoom, so that's one. It will be available, which is exciting. And by staying a part of this Zoom, you are consenting to be a part of that recording. So that's the legalese that we are required to say, and forgive me that we didn't say it a little bit earlier. That's one. And then somebody else asked if there's a recording of that video that you're referring to, Callie, and the story you told. And yes, there is. And so we'll do our best to try to get that in the chat before we're all said and done here. It's really wonderful. It's really, really powerful. And so yeah, we'll definitely want to. It's called Feast for Good. Yeah. So Swoon, just put it in there, Feast for Good. So you can find that video at Feast for Good, and it's a wonderful video. And with that, I'll have Heather start us off in our conversation here for a moment.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing, Callie, and hearing about your journey. Even though I've been side by side with you on it, it's always very moving, because one of the things for me about this work that's so important, and I'd love to hear you talk about it a little more, is the integration that happens. This idea that we actually sometimes think that if people actually knew us, or if they actually knew what we had faced or what we had saw or what we were navigating in our lives, that they wouldn't accept us. And how to kind of live with that separation that so many of us do. So many people that come to the Million Person Project say, if I ever told my true story, I'm afraid that people wouldn't like me, or that people wouldn't accept me. And so I just love to hear from you more about that process and kind of where you got the courage to tell a story that, frankly, you weren't being asked really to tell. Like, you were successful and people were asking you to come speak and they liked what you were doing, and you could have just continued on that road. So what drew you to really go to this other level of sharing?
Absolutely. I love that point. That, yeah, I was just thinking that today. Nobody asked me to tell that story. Nobody at that conference asked me to tell that story. Nobody in my life asked me to tell that story. Nobody was saying, you need to make this shift and do this terrifying thing. I just knew that I needed to do it because there was like a pressure that was kind of bursting out from inside of me. And I think that it was one of those things where I knew that if I didn't make meaning from the things that had happened, that they were going to continue to sort of take me apart from the inside. Um and so I just wanted to find a way to to I didn't know what I needed to say, but I knew I needed to say something. And, you know, the day I met you guys, I remember just grabbing you, Heather, and being like, I know that I have to start. And I don't know why, but I just know that there's some meaning that's going to come out of this.
Yeah, I remember that day so clearly too. So, one of the things that strikes me about your sharing and really moves me, and I feel very, very honored to get to see this process, is how much I feel like your storytelling honors your mom and honors your dad and honors your family and honors where you came from, even though you're like telling their story for them in some ways. And it's something that many, many, many people navigate when they go into storytelling. Our stories don't always just have us as the characters. So
Yeah.
what has it taken for you to be able, and the kind of theme of what you're working on now around legacies and choosing which legacies to carry forward and which parts of what you've been passed down to leave behind? How did you navigate telling your story and the work that you put in to honor your parents and all of that?
Yeah. Well, I think that two things stand out as important. And the first is that you guys would ask me these questions. You know, you'd say, okay, so you just told me a really difficult story about your family. Tell me more about your family. And then I'd say, oh gosh, well, actually, this woman that I just described as being a total nightmare was actually amazing. She was wonderful. We all adored her. She would host the best Christmas parties. She was hilarious. She cooked the best zucchini bread. She was the best. And so you were kind of saying, like, let's not let this story be one-sided. The truth is complicated, and let's really honor that. The fact that these people that in our lives are so difficult are never just one-sided. And another question that you asked me really early on that was really life-changing, I think it was on the second talk we gave, you said, okay, now you've been working on your process of forgiving others. Is there something that you have needed to be forgiven for? And I was like, what? And all of a sudden I realized, I was like, oh, I have been abusive in my life. I have been a nightmare. I have been a terror. And doing this work has also been about getting me to a place where I heal enough so that I don't pass on that trauma, which I have done. And so I think that the thing that's been so rich about this process is that it's never allowed me to just like sit on an easy answer, like that person was crazy and that person was like this. It's like, no, there's all these facets to each of the people in our lives and in our stories and ourselves. And that when we get in touch with that, it builds all these bridges. And so, you know, the sort of prompt that I'm thinking about myself is about this idea that there are traditions that you carry forward and that there are legacies that you leave behind. And the reason that that feels so important to me is it's about recognizing that those things are coming from the same place. That, like, in my own family, that I can say my father taught me how to garden and taught me how to be mischievous and playful, while at the same time I can recognize that my family my father's family is 5 generations of white Southerners, and that they passed down a serious legacy of white supremacy that I need to explore and look at and decide to let go of. And that's happening all in the same place. That's all in my family. That I can say I want to get past the addiction that comes from this part of my family, the negative cultural legacies that come from that part of my family, and I'm gonna love you and understand who you are. And how do I hold both of those things? And I feel like that's just a big part of my work right now, and so that's like something that I wanted to try and share as well.
Wow, thank you so much, Callie. That's incredible. You just offered so much right there. We could keep going here, but I want to start to transition us with that in mind to the workshop part of our time together here. I really appreciate what you brought up, holding the complexity of it, acknowledging and honoring the good, acknowledging, accepting, and choosing to transform the bad. And we don't even have to even get into that binary, but right, but just the complexity of it. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's really important for what we're going to transition to. And so I'm talking to everyone who's here with us this evening, and thank you all so much again for being here, because we're going to start to look at your stories a little bit now, and we're going to look at some prompts together and start to explore that. And so one of the interesting things about our work that Heather and I experience day in and day out, and we experience this with almost every single person we've worked with, and we've worked with thousands, is the resistance that comes up when you are considering beginning to share your story, or when you're considering to stepping into your truth and being more open with it. And there's two things that happen. There's two reactions that we get. One is that my story is too much. Someone will say, oh, it's too painful, it's too hard, it's too dark, it's too weird. You know, what Callie was marching around backstage thinking to herself, right, on all those bathroom trips. So that's one side of the puzzle. But the other thing we hear, if it's not that, what we hear is, oh, my story's not enough. It's boring. You know, I'm just another middle-class kid, so this, that, and the other. Oh, nobody wants to hear it. Oh, I'm just another, pick the identity. Nobody needs to hear from me, right? So people are either telling themselves, and this might sound familiar to some folks that we're seeing here tonight, either I'm too much or I'm not enough. And the truth is that neither of those things are true. The truth is that your story, when it's told from a place of generosity, when it's told from a place of authenticity, when it's told with an understanding that, hey, by sharing some of my truth, I can be freer and I can help somebody else get free. When it's told from there, it doesn't matter the life circumstances. There is something rich in there for us to learn from. And so I want to offer you that as we get into this exploration. Set aside the judgment. You ain't too much, and you are definitely not enough, right? So we'll just get into it with that. And we're going to do an exercise called moment mapping today. Do you have anything you want to say before I get into the instructions?
No, I think.
Okay, great. All right. So moment mapping is an exercise that we've developed in the recent past. I want to give a shout out to someone named Miyakota Taylor, a friend and a colleague and a brilliant facilitator and organizer in the Bay Area. She has an organization called Fierce Allies. So she was my thought partner for this idea of moment mapping. And we developed moment mapping to help people identify specific moments and experiences where they learned, where they grew, where they changed, where they had where something took place that really changed their understanding of the world. The reason that we do that is when we're talking about storytelling and we're talking about the power of storytelling, so much of the power that is held within personal narrative is about your ability to translate your values. Translate how you became who you are. Your ability to say, I care about this thing deeply, and here's why, right? Here's why. And I encourage you again to go check out Swoon's, to check out Callie's speech that somebody posted in there, the Feast for Good speech, because she does an incredible job of talking about this shift in her art practice based on examining and being more open about her lived experience, right? So stories are about values. Stories are a brilliant vehicle for values. And I think something that happens to folks sometimes is getting caught up in, well, I know I need to share part of my story, but I don't know which part, and there's so much, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, what is the value? What do you want people to understand about who you are and how you operate in the world and what you care about? Think about the stories that are associated with that. And one way to do that is zooming in on a specific moment. So this is called moment mapping. What you're going to do is take your piece of scratch paper, I've got my workbook here, a pen or a pencil. If you have markers, that's okay too. What I want you to do is you're going to hear a series of prompts. I'll be sharing one. Heather's going to share a prompt as well. And we're going to be plugging them into the chat so you can see them. Okay. When you hear the prompt, what you're going to do is reflect on that. And you can either capture words, or you can capture images, or you can do a combination of both. We often have people work with images because practically we work across a lot of language differences. So there's a practicality to it there, but also because it gets you into a more creative space, and you're using a different part of your brain, getting into that more intuitive side of your brain. So I invite you to capture an image. So you're going to capture an image and or words that are responding to this prompt that you're about to hear. We'll take a few minutes for each one, maybe I would say 3 to 4 minutes probably for each of these prompts for you to do that. And then we're going to share out via at least we'll start sharing out via the chat. We may have the opportunity to hear some voices. We'll kind of play that by ear, but we'll start with the prompts.
Yeah, so if you're willing to post in the chat your response to the moment mapping, we would love to see it. It can be really vibrant when you see all these stories coming in through chat.
Yeah, and we'll be kind of lifting them up too. So I'm going to share this prompt in about 30 seconds, but let's just breathe for about 30 seconds. So find yourself in a comfortable position. I know many people are coming from work and might have other things, and maybe folks running around, and who knows. So we'll just take a moment together to just breathe. Feel free to close your eyes if that's comfortable, or just soften your gaze. And I won't time us, but I'll just offer maybe 30 seconds, give or take, of some silence. And then I'll offer the prompt, and we'll go from there. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, okay? And we'll start our moment of silence here now. Okay, so our first prompt. Think of a moment when someone offered an important lesson for you growing up. On your page or in your head, think about the person that offered you the lesson and capture an image that reveals the person that taught you the lesson, and then write a few sentences about the lesson you learned and how it impacted the values you hold today. So that's a lot. Heather's gonna put it in the chat. I'm gonna say it again as she does that. So think of a moment when someone offered an important lesson for you growing up. On your page or in your head, think about the person who offered you that lesson and capture an image that reveals the person. And then write a few sentences about the lesson you learned and how it impacted the values you hold today. We have a little over a minute left here. If you've written something you'd like to share, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll check it out. So we're seeing some awesome sharing in our chat here. Let me just offer a couple. So John says, I had trouble learning how to read as a kid. Mom gave me books on Christmas and I cried in agony because it meant so much hard work. She looked at me and said, you're going to learn how to read. I was not happy about it. I struggled with reading most of my life, but I learned, even though it was painful. Yeah, so much there. Lessons of resilience, perseverance. Wonderful. Thank you, John. Want to read one?
Yeah, one thing I want to say is, this workshop is in part to support people who want to submit to the PBS American Portrait, which is a project where people can submit like 1-minute short videos talking on a prompt. And so they have a lot of prompts, but some of their prompts are like a couple that we thought related to this moment mapping prompt was I stand for, or I was raised to believe. And so instead of answering the question in a general way, you can answer the question by telling a story. So that moment, John, that you with your mom is like a moment where you were raised to believe that you could do it even if it was hard, or something, like however you would say it. So thank you all. We see all these. This one?
Yeah.
Melissa.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll read another one from Melissa. It says, my dad, when he got angry with me for telling Lily, my dog, that I hated her for chewing up something expensive, I learned that even if people don't understand our words, they feel our energy. The love is more than a sentiment, that our loved ones deserve our compassion, even when they make us angry, do hurtful things. Oh, that's so sweet. And then image of me sitting on the floor and Lily's face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you can see, that would be a really beautiful and short something to share for that prompt around I was raised to believe. So we'll continue to talk about some of the prompts that inspired these questions. And Heather's going to share our second prompt.
Yeah, so our second prompt, what we would love for you all to do is capture a moment where you faced a challenge and you stepped into your courage. So what did you call on in that moment? And it's okay if the moment between facing the challenge and calling on your courage was decades, or however soon after it was. So the prompt is, capture a moment where you faced a challenge and stepped into your courage. What did you call on in that moment? And we would love to hear some of the sharing in the chat. We'll set a few minutes on the timer.
All right, so we're wrapping up this prompt. We're going to go to our other one. I want to share. I really, we were asking you to do a lot here, right? Focus on your story, but there's also some brilliant stories here. So really want to acknowledge and appreciate everyone who's sharing in here. Let me see one that I just saw that I liked that inspired me. Oh my gosh, there's so many good ones. Let's see. When starting college, I had no family, no money, and no home to go to. I was told by the registrar's office that my loans and grants did not come through, so I would be unable to attend college. After getting my crying out, I went back, worked it out with them. Nothing is impossible if you believe and stick with it. So much there. Appreciate that sharing. When my partner was sued and then unemployed for 7 months, called upon my willingness and just got busy and fierce, opened and sold out 2 new coaching programs and got our family through it. There it is. Thank you for sharing that, Kelly. I didn't even know that was you. We know Kelly. A teacher who encouraged me not to leave undergrad studies because she believed I had ability. I'd never had that support and didn't think I was worthy of continuing education in art. My teacher asked where I'd been and why I wasn't in school. This was a turning point for me, that someone believed in me. Wow, that immediately takes me back to a beloved math teacher in junior college for me who noticed when I stopped showing up to math and said, hey, I looked at your transcripts. This is your 5th time trying to take this math class. How about this is the last time? And she got me back in there and busted my butt until I finished. So I can really appreciate that one. Beautiful. Thank you all again for this wonderful sharing. So we're going to do one more final prompt here, and I'll share the prompt. We'll take a few minutes to do it, and then Heather will copy it into the chat so you can see it if you need it. So this final prompt is: think of a moment where you experienced healing you didn't think you'd ever experience. Capture the moment. Reflect on and capture in words or images how you became more whole. Okay? How did you become more whole? What does this healing make you believe is possible for your life and other people's lives? So this prompt, we're starting to get into the lessons you've learned, but also thinking about, well, what might be there for others in those lessons? Okay? So Heather's going to capture that in the chat for you now. We're going to take a few minutes there. Repeat the prompt. I'm going to just share the prompt one more time since we have so much action in our chat, but it is in the chat. We'll put it there again. I just put it back in the chat, but think of a moment where you experienced healing you didn't think you'd ever experience. Capture the moment, reflect on and capture how you became more whole. What does this healing make you believe is possible for your life and other people's lives? We'll take another minute or so here, a little bit.
So thank you all so much for sharing. It's so amazing to get to see all of these people's stories just popping up in this thread here. They're moving so quickly that it's hard to keep one in the same place to read it. So I'll read this one. I was standing in a drugstore. I overheard a song. I kept listening to it, trying to grasp a few words. It was like a chain store, and the song was Southern Cross. That is when I knew I had experienced a shift, not at the exact time, but hearing the song made me realize I had experienced the shift as I began to let the people in my life leave, since I was not to be the idiot any longer. Mm-hmm. I bet that has to do with the lyrics of the song. So, decades after a painful childhood and family bullying, my relatives finally acknowledged and apologized. It made me see that change is always possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, how powerful to get that, acknowledgement. Healing came to me about when our mentally ill son, when I realized I couldn't take away his mental illness and I could just love him. Yeah, beautiful, and something in there for all of us.
Oh, I like this one. I'll just do the last one we share, and then maybe we'll see if there's any questions or thoughts as we shift. Complaining to my therapist about feeling manic, out of control, everything felt oversaturated and too vivid. My therapist just looked at me and said, maybe you're just happy. I love that one. So thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for sharing. So do you want to copy those in there? So we wanted to take a moment. We have a few more minutes here together. Let me just say about what we just did one more time, this moment mapping. So as you can see, just by exploring, and please, if you haven't, read at least 5 or 6 of the sharing in here on any of the prompts. There is so much richness there, and that's why we do this, and that's why we draw you to a moment, because we want you to see and experience that really you can, by illuminating just one moment, you can illuminate so much about who you are, what you care about, and what you have to offer the world. And so much of the power of storytelling is that illumination of through story, people being able to see and understand what you have to offer. So what I want you all to take away from this, or at least part of that, is just that recognition that, and that this is a practice you can do, allowing yourself to go to a moment, think about the moment, and think about the impact it had on you and how that might, and for us, we often think about it with that phrase, values. When we talk about values, it's like, what do you believe in? What do you feel is important in life? That's all values are, right? So thinking about those moments and then reflecting on how they might, how they've influenced your values, and just that alone, by sharing that, even in a Facebook post, or even with friends, or even in small ways, can be really rich and can be really hopeful and can open up so much. I read that was a random share. It's one that I read about the teacher, and it totally rushed me back emotionally to this moment that was so important for me. You can do that for someone with just that short piece of sharing. So with that, I think we want to transition to doing some questions and seeing if there are questions or comments. Let's use the chat and see if we can see some questions from folks. If you have any questions about how you might share your story, where, why, anything along those lines, anything that wasn't clear from what we've offered to this point. Definitely, if you have any questions about the PBS project, or if you're considering that, then we'll take questions there as well.
Yeah, and one thing that we want to say as the questions are coming in is that the PBS project is you upload a video onto the platform, and that's where you can share your story on a specific prompt. But a lot of times when we share our stories, or when we're responding to a prompt, we don't actually go in and share the actual moment. So we share generally about something that happened to us. And what we're working on right here today is how to actually use storytelling to really take somebody into the feeling and the emotion of what it was like to be you in that situation. And that's where the connection really gets built, is when we can relate to each other by we're hardwired for stories. So when we hear somebody go into a story, it's really hard for us to turn away. We want to listen and hear what happened. And so getting specific with your stories and sharing images and details and feelings is really powerful. And Callie, feel free to jump in at any time and answer any of these questions that you're seeing pop up.
And we're getting a lot of good questions. So let us look at those and try to organize our thoughts here.
I'll just say a little bit about PBS American Portrait. So it is true that it's this specific story portal is about American stories. And the reason that that got started is because this incredible division that's been happening in the US over the past few years, that the folks at PBS were like, how do we create a platform where people can start to build bridges? And so I wanted anyone to be able to join the workshop because I think that this process is a process that people anywhere in the world can benefit from. And I would suggest that if you aren't in the US and not like eligible to submit a story, that, start your own platform or look at other platforms, that there are definitely other ways, or share it on your own channels, be inspired by it. Absolutely. But that for folks, that the project itself, it's sort of specifically in this moment about creating kind of a moment of bridge building and healing because of the last 4 years that we have had.
Thank you for that, Callie. Are we? Yeah. Okay. Good. Just making sure we weren't muted. That's really great. Thank you for sharing that, Callie. And we've posted the link to the PBS project in there a number of times, so track that down. So we had some questions about the Million Person Project. I'm going to use that to answer another question that we have here. So the Million Person Project, Heather and I started it in 2011. This year will be our 10-year anniversary. Can you believe it? Pretty wild. So we work with people all over the world. We work, we do our work in one-on-one coaching. We also do work with organizations and companies and teams within that. And our work is really about helping people to find the stories that are at the root of who they are and how they move and operate, and using those stories to help move people to action, using those stories to inspire, to connect, and move the work and do what you want to do in life. So whether that's the work, like your actual job, or whether that's passion projects or things that you're just really passionate about in your life, we want you to help you find your story, to be able to enroll people in that work, enroll people in your vision, and really move with you. We talk a lot about you can find your people through story. By sharing your story, people go, oh snap, that's one of me. Okay, let's rock, So that's kind of what we help do. So there's so much more to say about that. We can share a link to our work, but I wanted to use that to transition to this question: how to organize your thoughts when it becomes a dizzying amount of negative memories and becomes so overwhelming. So this is something we work with people day in and day out in our work. People, as Callie are sharing stories they never shared. They're sharing stories with a huge amount of, emotional resonance, right, is one way to say it, but that gets you in a really emotional space. So one thing that I will offer for that is, one thing is thinking about why you're sharing the story. And one of the ways that we have folks do that is think about yourself at a given age, or think about yourself in that moment of the story you're sharing. What would you have wanted or needed to hear from somebody to be able to manage better, to be able to find your center and work your way through? What would you have wanted to hear? Think about that young person. Think about somebody in your life who, if you were able to open up and share that story fully, would benefit from it, that they would find strength from it, that they might pull them off a ledge. So think about that purpose and the reason you're sharing that story. That can be a very grounding experience. The other thing that I would offer is figuring out small ways in which you can share it, because part of what helps you to be able to stay in the story and be connected with the emotion but not overcome by it is practice, is just familiarizing yourself with the story, and by that, familiarizing yourself with the emotions that you're going to feel, and in that, not having those emotions surprise you, overwhelm you, embarrass you. That can come through repetition and being grounded in why you're sharing, and then just taking the opportunity to share. So maybe that's with a partner or a friend. Maybe that's a small group of friends. Maybe it's just on a video with yourself. Maybe it's in front of the mirror. There's a lot of ways to do that. That's a couple of things I would offer there. You see any other questions to get to?
Yeah, I see a couple questions, and I'm just going to post a link. People are asking about other exercises that they can do or other workshops that they can attend. So one of the things I wanted to share is that Julian and I wrote a book, and it has a lot of prompts. It's called How Your Story Sets You Free. And it's a little gold book. And it can guide you through a lot of these prompts, because what we've done today is just kind of get some stories out. And the next step is to really do that with your whole life, to do a whole life map out all the turning points, the influential people, the moments of challenge, the moments of celebration, the moments that really impacted your values and your belief system, and really map that all out, and then kind of hone in on the threads that you want to share more publicly. And so our book can help you do that. And so can we. We have classes and programs and other things that you can sign up for if you want. But I think one of the main things around personal storytelling is to allow yourself to be inspired by other people. And I think one of the things is watching Callie's talk and getting to see how she's out in the world. I see a lot of artists on here, how she's out in her world, in the world, sort of, and how her truth, her spoken truth and sharing speeches and writing, how that intersects with her practice. And I see a question about that, actually, Callie, that maybe you could speak to, of just how does, to talk a little bit more about how this communication tool of storytelling, how that intersects with your practice, your artistic practice.
Yeah. Well, I think that this evening is kind of the perfect example that, I have started to tell my story and in various ways over the years. And I would encourage you guys, even, I have a friend who's just started writing Facebook posts once a day, and he tells little snippets of his life, and they're super wonderful to read. And so there are so many ways that we can do this, and that we can start to get a little bit of, just experience being more open and sharing. And so, for me, I've done talks, I've done essays, even Instagram posts feel like they're very much part of my work at this point. And when I have people will sometimes reach out to me and say, like, hey, that artwork that you made or that story that you told, helped me understand my own family, or helped me grieve the passing of a loved one, or anything like that, where something that I have shared has sort of become part of how someone else feels from their own experience, always feels like such, for me, when I hear something like that, I'm like, this is what we're doing, like, this is it, and I feel so much gratitude for the ability to both feel less alone and to help others feel less alone. And so I think that that's like, what inspires me to say, hey, let's do this, and everyone, just thank you to Heather and Julian and to Amanda, everyone just kind of volunteering and being like, let's just put on this free workshop, because we believe so deeply in the way that people's lives can change when they start to share. And I also, once I started to share, then I started to be able to make different kinds of artworks. So I made a work called The Medea, which builds in this whole story. I'm about to make a feature film that I wrote, like a fairy tale about the period of my life that I mentioned, about the psychotic episode of my mom's. I turned that into a fairy tale, and now I'm working on a film of that. So there are all these ways that once something becomes speakable, you can start to live with it and process it in so many different ways.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Callie. I know I wanted time for that question about the how sharing that story influenced your art. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Really wonderful. Just one more thing about a way to carry on this conversation. Right now, in 15 minutes, I set it up for 5:15 on Clubhouse. If you are using Clubhouse, which is a new social media app where you can have actual literal conversations, it's an audio app. We're going to be doing a Clubhouse conversation. We'll be hosting it, and we'll be inviting your all's voices and some folks that are on here, and some other members of the Million Person Project team will be on there. It's called Finding the Power in Your Story. So join us in Clubhouse in about 15 minutes for that conversation. It's the first time we've ever done it. I really don't even know what the heck Clubhouse is, but we're about to find out. Let's find out together. So I wanted to just offer that and hope you all can join us. I put the name in there. Hope you can track us down.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to say to start to wrap this all up is just one note on on sharing your story, because so many of you just jumped right in and started sharing in the chats, and no editing, just put it out there. And I just wanted to say that when we share in small and big ways, one of the things that can be common is something that Brene Brown calls a vulnerability hangover. And it's like a feeling that after you share, you wish you would have shared differently, or you wish that you wouldn't have shared, or, and what I always say is that, that's just getting a vulnerability hangover is just like a feather in your cap to living a more transparent life, and sharing your story. And it's kind of part of the whole process sometimes. So what we always say is, kick your feet up, have an extra scoop of ice cream, treat yourself to something, watch a funny movie. Storytelling isn't always easy. And sometimes sometimes it leaves us a little tender or raw, and just letting that, just knowing that you can care for yourself and that's okay. And that it's part of us sort of breaking the stigma of always staying silent. And so just know that. And I'd love to kick it over to you, Callie, to sort of close us out.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely want to second the shame over. That is so real, but it passes. It's part of the process. And so I just want to close both by thanking the hosts so much. You guys are amazing. And everyone definitely take a look at Heather and Julian's book. There's the processes in it, the life mapping is in it. I encourage you to take workshops, to be involved in their work in any way. Also, thank you to Amanda and to if you were here. And then the last piece is the project that this connects back to. So so PBS started this initiative called the American Portrait, and they asked me to create a piece of public art that would somehow celebrate this kind of sharing, this epic open source story project. And so I've started to create a sculpture. It's called The House Our Families Built. And it's this box truck that unpacks into a sculpture. It's going to travel around to various places in New York City. And it's also going to have performances. There's an amazing cast of actors that have started to interpret some of the stories that people contributed to the site. And then these workshops are an aspect of the project. And then the stories that you contribute to the American Portrait website will be an aspect of the project. So I would encourage people to take a look through the prompts, look at the documentaries that they've put together. They've put together little hour-long documentaries with people's different shares in them. And then just make a share or two. And when you do, there's all the different kind of prompts. But when you do, if you can, or if you are interested, tag it The House Our Families Built in the hashtag. And what's going to happen is that we're going to be searching that hashtag. And when the sculpture appears in public, there's 2 different days. There's a performance day and a sculpture day. And on the sculpture day, there's going to be kind of a sound loop playing in the truck. And so what we're going to do is take some of the stories that have been tagged The House Our Families Built, and we're going to build them into the sound loop, so that the things that we're generating right here tonight, the things that you contribute to the site, if you want to tag it, can then become part of the life of the sculpture. So thank you guys so much. We're going to do 2 more workshops. We're going to dig into some more topics. The next set of topics is going to be what I started to talk about with unpacking my dad's family legacy, that what to do when there are legacies in your family that you want to consciously move past, and to start to just develop a sharing space where we can dig into some of that stuff. And then the last workshop is going to be about food, because we found that a lot of the emotional stories that were coming up in the performance are around memories that people bring up around food. So we're going to be talking about food, and those will be in the next couple of weeks. So maybe you guys can join us for those too.
Yes.
Also, I'll just mention for the hangover for tonight, if you still need a couple more things to do, we actually have like a full event list of things tonight with workshops. In 1 hour at 6 o'clock, there's a movement for creatives. It's sort of like really intuitive, really subtle. You kind of just lie on the floor. It's really healing and resets your nervous system with Nikki DeStane, who's an artist. I recommend that. It is $18, but all the money does go directly to her. And then at 7 our time, which is in California, so a little late for New York, 10 o'clock for New York, we are doing an hour of figure drawing with an online figure model. And that's $10, and all the money goes to the artist as well. So I'll put in the link if anyone wants to.
In there before we sign off. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Again,
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Blessings, everyone. Thank you so much. I hope to see some of you at our Clubhouse conversation.
And if you want, we can turn off our
Look forward to your stories.
or unmute and say goodbye. If anyone
Oh yeah. Let's hear the cacophony of goodbye. Oh yeah.
Hi, Carolyn.
That's awesome.
Yes, hey Victor.
Oh,
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys did great. Thanks.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, Robin.
Thank you.
Guys, this is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.